Good evening, dear generals. I hope you're having a good day so far. Welcome to Men Around the Führer series, where tonight we follow the shadow of a man whose ambition was his ruin, a figure who mistook vanity for wisdom and absolute loyalty for strength. His name echoes through the halls of defeated empires, Joachim von Ribbentrop. He was not a warrior, but a diplomat, not a man of conscience, but a master of deceit, using ink and protocol to ignite the devastating fires of the 20th century. Joachim was born on the Rhine, in Wesel, on the 30th of April, 1893. He was simply Joachim Ribbentrop then, the son of Lieutenant Robert Ribbentrop, an artillery officer. His lineage could be traced back quite a distance, though the name Ribbentrop itself was taken from an earlier ancestor, Heinrich Meyer. Though born into a sixth generation of army officers, Joachim refused to consider a military career. His early life was shaped by constant movement, following his father's military assignments to garrisons like Metz, a town deeply influenced by both French and German cultures. From an early age, he was an isolated child, recalled by his classmates as cold and arrogant. This disciplined, transient life instilled in him an air of confidence, yet concealed a deep internal fear of being looked down upon, a feeling that would drive his entire existence. A defining moment arrived in 1908 when his father was forced to resign from the German Imperial Army after criticizing Kaiser Wilhelm II. The family lost its status and income, a downfall that became a profound wound in young Joachim's psyche, nurturing an obsession with restoring lost honor, no matter the cost. With the aid of his aunt, Gertrude, he was sent to school in Switzerland, where he learned aristocratic manners and refined his language skills, becoming proficient in both French and English, a rare talent among German youth. His teachers noted that despite his linguistic abilities, he lacked real social grace, appearing intelligent but overly concerned with proving himself. His talent lay not in intellect, but in the art of making an impression. In 1910, seeking success independent of lineage, Ribbentrop left for Canada. There he worked various jobs, including timekeeper on the Quebec Bridge, a sales clerk, and a wine trader. He absorbed a misguided belief that everything, even honor and position, could be bought with enough cunning. Upon his return to Germany after the First World War, where he served in the 12th Hussar Regiment, he found financial success as a salesman for a French firm, and later as a partner in a Berlin sales agency. He became, in essence, a champagne salesman. But his true social elevation came in 1920 when he married Anna Elisabeth Henkel, the daughter of a wealthy Wiesbaden wine producer. This marriage brought him the financial wealth he craved, enabling him to step into the upper-middle-class life he had pursued since childhood. Yet, lacking genuine nobility, Ribbentrop pursued the ultimate status symbol. In 1925, his distant relative, Gertrude von Ribbentrop, formally adopted him, allowing him to legally append the coveted nobiliary particle, von, to his name. He was now Joachim von Ribbentrop, a purchased nobleman. Though contemporaries mocked him for his snobbery, he believed image mattered more than origin, and for the ascending social climber, he was right. Franz von Papen, an acquaintance, noted Ribbentrop's immediate and great social ambitions. Ribbentrop was a snob with a vengeance, valuing fine dinners with prominent personalities above all else, seeing this as the supreme manifestation of a world-view. In the turbulent late 1920s, Ribbentrop was apolitical, showing no overt anti-Semitic prejudices and favoring a return to the monarchy. He even did business with Jewish merchants and bankers in Berlin, having organized his importing company with Jewish financing. But in 1928, a mutual friend introduced him to Adolf Hitler, describing Ribbentrop as a businessman with foreign connections who gets the same price for German champagne as others get for French champagne. Ribbentrop was mesmerized by Hitler's personality and saw in him the greatest opportunity to restore Germany's power and, crucially, the honor his own family had lost. Ribbentrop and Anna joined the Nazi Party on May 1, 1932. He immediately plunged into high-level politics, offering his home in Berlin's Dahlem district for secret meetings. These talks, hammered out in his villa, were instrumental in the political deal between Papen and Hitler that culminated in Hitler's appointment as Chancellor on January 30, 1933. Joachim von Ribbentrop became a crucial political middleman. Hitler quickly developed a trust in Ribbentrop, a trust that perplexed seasoned diplomats and Nazi old fighters alike. Ribbentrop was the Nazi almost all the other leading Nazis hated. Joseph Goebbels famously confided to his diary that Ribbentrop bought his name, he married his money, and he swindled his way into office. Hermann Goering, who held nothing but contempt for him, later called him Germany's #1 parrot and a cheap champagne salesman. Yet Ribbentrop possessed the one quality Hitler valued above all: absolute, blind devotion. He had no original thought in his head and was limited to parroting the Führer's words. He listened carefully to Hitler's monologues, memorized his pet ideas, and then presented them back as his own. Hitler, who distrusted established Foreign Office personnel as reactionary noble families with no grasp of Nazi ideology, believed Ribbentrop was the only man he could rely on to tell him the truth about the world abroad. Ribbentrop quickly learned that Hitler preferred the most radical solution to any problem and tailored his advice accordingly. By 1933, Ribbentrop was Hitler's foreign affairs advisor. By late 1934, he leveraged Hitler's support to create the semi-autonomous Dienststelle Ribbentrop Bureau. This parallel foreign policy body, staffed eventually by 300 people, openly meddled in foreign affairs and was tasked with important non-official missions, bypassing the formal Foreign Office led by Konstantin von Neurath. The Bureau gathered intelligence through unconventional means, like bribing journalists and paying informants, relaying information directly to the Führer. Ribbentrop's early diplomatic successes were crucial to his rise. Appointed Special Commissioner for Disarmament in 1934, his ostensible mission was to convince the world Germany sincerely wanted peace and arms limitation. However, the real aim was to stall genuine treaties while Germany ramped up its rearmament. In June 1935, he achieved the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, a diplomatic coup which the professional diplomats thought impossible. He secured it by issuing an ultimatum to the British delegation. This achievement was regarded by Hitler as the happiest day in my life, marking what he hoped was the beginning of an Anglo-German alliance. Ribbentrop continued to build alliances around the ideological core of National Socialism. In 1936, he spearheaded the anti-Comintern Pact with Japan, signed in the offices of the Dienststelle Ribbentrop rather than the Foreign Ministry. Ribbentrop claimed this was an ideological matter, a common effort to counter communism, but it contained a strong political element against the Soviet Union. Furthermore, Ribbentrop designed the pact with an eye toward containing the British Empire, viewing the Western Allies as Germany's main enemy. In August 1936, Hitler appointed Joachim von Ribbentrop ambassador to the court of St. James's in London. This mission was the culmination of Hitler's greatest wish, a political and military alliance with Great Britain to eliminate the Soviet Union. Ribbentrop went to London believing his proficiency in English and his cultivated aristocratic manner could achieve this goal. The mission quickly became a disaster. Ribbentrop was immediately lampooned by the British press. He lacked any feeling for British sensibilities. His rigidity, arrogance, and ostentation made him a laughingstock in diplomatic circles. The worst gaffe occurred when, upon meeting King George VI in early 1937, Ribbentrop raised his hand in the Nazi salute and shouted, "Heil Hitler!" The entire room fell silent. The king did not reply in kind, and the act seriously damaged Germany's image. His secretary, Reinhard Spitzy, stated that Ribbentrop behaved very stupidly and very pompously, and the British don't like pompous people. Ribbentrop failed fundamentally to understand British political culture, believing that a small circle of 200 elite families or King Edward VIII, whom he perceived as friendly to Germany, dictated foreign policy. He reported back to Hitler that Britain longed for an alliance, even though British cabinet ministers gave him a cold reception. This misreading of the situation deepened Hitler's reliance on him, as Ribbentrop was the only person reporting such sunny prospects. The English press dubbed him the Wandering Aryan because he spent so little time in London, frequently flying back to Berlin to interfere with foreign affairs and stay close to Hitler. When Goering warned Hitler that Ribbentrop was a stupid ass, Hitler dismissed the concern by saying Ribbentrop knew quite a lot of important people in England. Goering retorted, "But after all, he knows him." Ribbentrop spent much of his time demanding that Britain return the former German colonies. In 1937, he was forced into the embarrassing position of having to turn down an Anglo-French offer to discuss colonial return because Hitler was not interested if the price was slowing German expansion in Eastern Europe. By the end of his London mission, Ribbentrop no longer believed an understanding with Britain was possible, and he developed an intense dislike for the country that had ridiculed him. Some close to him believed the failure of his mission left him with a desire to humiliate Britain. Ribbentrop achieved his ultimate goal in February 1938, when, following a shake-up in the German military command, Hitler dismissed the cautious Constantin von Neurath and appointed Ribbentrop as Reich Foreign Minister. Hitler sought a foreign minister who would simply parrot his aims and execute his directives without offering unwanted advice or argument. Ribbentrop was the ideal choice. His tenure began immediately with the preparation for foreign aggression, marking the beginning of the counts of conspiracy and crimes against peace. Ribbentrop was only 8 days into his new role when the Austrian Chancellor, Kurt von Schuschnigg, was forced into talks with Hitler at Berchtesgaden. Schuschnigg later asserted in an affidavit that he was called before Ribbentrop, who, in the presence of Franz von Papen, exhibited a typewritten draft containing Hitler's final, non-negotiable demands upon Austria. Ribbentrop advised Schuschnigg to accept the demands at once. At his trial, Ribbentrop denied knowing the exact details of what Hitler wanted to achieve, claiming his discussion with Schuschnigg was amicable and confined to general subjects, urging closer contact between the two German nations. He denied placing the Austrian Chancellor under political pressure. Nevertheless, he was delighted at the subsequent entry of German troops, though he denied knowing of any military preparations beforehand. He was convicted for his role in applying political and military pressure on Schuschnigg. The Czechoslovakian crisis revealed Ribbentrop's eagerness for war. The initial objective was the Sudetenland region, ostensibly to address the grievances of the Sudeten German minority. However, the captured documents show that Hitler was only interested in using the Sudeten Germans as a lever to dismantle Czechoslovakia entirely. At a conference with Hitler in March 1938, Ribbentrop was present when Sudeten leader Konrad Henlein was advised by Hitler to always demand so much that we can never be satisfied. Ribbentrop then met Henlein, advising him to maintain the closest possible collaboration with the Reich Foreign Minister. Ribbentrop later testified that he had done nothing to direct these efforts in such a way that a really serious problem might arise, though it is hard to speculate what outcome he expected other than conflict. When Britain and France met Hitler at Munich in September 1938, conceding the Sudetenland to prevent war, Ribbentrop felt cheated. He regarded the Munich agreement as a diplomatic defeat for Germany, fearing that Western concession would only delay the inevitable conflict and give the enemy more time to arm. He told associates it would have been better if war had come immediately. Ribbentrop was determined that the next crisis would result in the war he desired. He played a critical role in the final annexation of the remainder of Czechoslovakia in March 1939. First, he instigated the independence crisis in Slovakia, pressuring Joseph Tiso to declare independence or face annexation by Hungary. Then, Ribbentrop participated in the brutal psychological pressure applied to Czechoslovak President Emil Hácha in Berlin, forcing him to sign away his country to Germany. Hácha collapsed and had to be revived with injections before he signed the document entrusting the fate of the Czech people to the Führer. Ribbentrop had ordered the German embassy in Prague to avoid all communication with the Czech government during the crisis, ensuring Hitler could conduct the negotiations personally without interference. Immediately afterward, Ribbentrop used diplomatic terror to secure the city of Memel from Lithuania, threatening to have the Luftwaffe raze Kaunas to the ground if they refused to relinquish the territory. With a single phone call, he expanded the Reich. The destruction of Czechoslovakia convinced Britain and France that Germany was bent on conquering Europe, leading them to guarantee Polish independence. Ribbentrop focused on undermining this commitment. After an unsuccessful visit to Warsaw in January 1939, where Polish demands about Danzig and the corridor were rejected, Ribbentrop concluded that an alliance with Britain was impossible, and only an agreement with the Soviet Union could secure Germany's anti-Polish and anti-British goals. Ribbentrop became the leading internal advocate for a German-Soviet understanding. He supplied Hitler with diplomatic dispatches and British press summaries, often translating pro-appeasement articles to convince the Führer that Britain would never honor its commitments to Poland. Ribbentrop assured Hitler that Britain and France would not go to war over Poland. The culmination of his aggressive diplomacy was the flight to Moscow in August 1939. Ribbentrop's conversation with Italian Foreign Minister Count Ciano just before this trip starkly revealed his intentions. When Ciano asked Ribbentrop if Germany wanted the corridor or Danzig, Ribbentrop replied coldly, "Not anymore. We want war." Ciano noted that the will to fight was unalterable, and Ribbentrop rejected any solution that might satisfy Germany and prevent the conflict. On August 23, 1939, Ribbentrop signed the Treaty of Non-Aggression with the Soviet Union. This event, his crowning achievement, not only established a public non-aggression pact, but included secret protocols partitioning much of Eastern Europe between the two powers. In Moscow, Ribbentrop exchanged toasts with Stalin in honor of German-Soviet friendship despite their ideological differences. The next day, Hitler, convinced by Ribbentrop that the British were bluffing, fixed the date for the invasion of Poland. Every signature Ribbentrop penned concealed an invasion plan. When the bombs began to fall on Poland in September 1939, Ribbentrop believed he had achieved his greatest diplomatic triumph, successfully avoiding a two-front war. He then tried to blame the conflict on Britain, claiming World War II was England's fault, and that Britain was constantly oppressing us, and was afraid Germany was getting too strong. The war did not follow Ribbentrop's planned path. Paradoxically, once the fighting began, the importance of the foreign ministry diminished significantly. The future would be settled on the battlefield, not at the negotiating table. Ribbentrop's influence with Hitler began to wane, and he increasingly became a background or peripheral figure. He continued to execute major alliances, however. On September 27, 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan signed the Tripartite Pact, officially creating the Axis alliance. This was part of Ribbentrop's grander and ultimately delusional foreign policy concept, a Eurasian continental bloc, an anti-British coalition stretching from Madrid to Tokyo, incorporating the four totalitarian states of Germany, Italy, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Ribbentrop pursued this vision, hoping to force Britain to concede. This vision crashed in June 1941. Ribbentrop strongly opposed the invasion of the Soviet Union, believing that breaking the Non-Aggression Pact was a strategic mistake. When the order came, he was reported to be deeply nervous and confused. When forced to present the German declaration of war, or rather, the statement of military countermeasures, to the Soviet ambassador, General Vladimir Dekhanozov, the interpreter Paul Schmidt noted Ribbentrop pacing like a caged animal and constantly reassuring himself. "The Führer is absolutely right. We must attack Russia, or they will surely attack us." Ribbentrop later secretly passed word to a Soviet diplomat. "Please tell Stalin I was against this war, and that I know it will bring great misfortune to Germany." Hitler did not forgive those who were right when he was wrong, and this opposition was a career killer for Ribbentrop. During this period, he also provided faulty counsel regarding the United States. Drawing on his brief years in North America before 1914, he boasted of being an expert on all things American, assuring Hitler that the United States was not a serious military power and that a war with Japan's aid was the best way to begin the inevitable conflict with the U.S. He told an Italian delegation, "A country devoid of culture, devoid of music, above all, a country without soldiers, a people who will never be able to decide the war from the air." When Japan finally attacked Pearl Harbor, Count Ciano reported that Ribbentrop was overjoyed. As Germany suffered reversals after 1943, Hitler increasingly avoided the foreign minister, finding him tiresome. Ribbentrop tried desperately to hold on to influence, proposing complex plans for a European peace conference, which Hitler rejected, arguing that only military necessity could dictate affairs in occupied territories. In a final desperate move in 1945, Ribbentrop even offered to fly to Moscow with his family as a pawn to convince Stalin of Germany's sincerity for peace, an offer Hitler rejected with disgust. While Ribbentrop primarily dealt with foreign policy, his role in the systematic crimes of the Nazi regime, war crimes and crimes against humanity, was substantial and damning. His function was to provide the lawful face and diplomatic mechanism for Germany's brutal policies. Although his personal anti-Semitism was debated, with some historians believing it was largely feigned to curry favor with Hitler, his actions were critical to the machinery of the Holocaust. He may not have fully understood how serious Hitler was about the Jewish question until 1943, but thereafter, he fully participated. Ribbentrop and the Foreign Office were deeply involved in the planning and administration of the Nazi final solution. In 1942, Ribbentrop ordered German diplomats in Axis countries to hasten the process of sending Jews to death camps in the East. The Foreign Office's assistance was vital because the majority of Jews marked for extermination lived outside the Reich, in Allied or occupied territories. Ribbentrop assigned all Holocaust-related matters to Martin Luther, his former interior decorator and hatchet man. Through diplomatic pressure, Ribbentrop ensured the deportation of Jews from Vichy France, Slovakia, Croatia, and Hungary. In April 1943, during a summit with Hungary's regent Miklos Horthy regarding the deportation of Hungarian Jews, Ribbentrop explicitly stated, "The Jews must either be exterminated or taken to the concentration camps. There is no other possibility." His efforts to expedite the deportation of Hungarian Jews alone resulted in the loss of over 300,000 lives to Auschwitz. Ribbentrop later claimed before the tribunal that he was unaware of the extermination program, having only heard vague rumors and insisting the matter was closed up from his perspective. He defined a concentration camp merely as a type of prison. The tribunal flatly rejected this denial, finding it implausible that someone so central to the regime could have been ignorant of its aggressive and criminal nature. He was also complicit in war crimes. The Foreign Office, under his direction, was involved in encouraging the governments of occupied territories to take harsh measures against anyone who resisted. Ribbentrop supported brutal policies in the Balkans and was involved in discussions regarding the treatment of Allied terror flyers. airmen who had bombed German civilians. He later argued that the necessary actions against civilian populations were justified as preventive intervention. Ribbentrop's fate was sealed by his devotion to Hitler. In July 1944, when the military plot to assassinate Hitler occurred, many Foreign Office staff members were implicated. Ribbentrop was not involved, but the incident reflected poorly on him, and he worked closely with the SS to purge the ministry. During the aftermath, Goering publicly shamed him, shouting, "You dirty little champagne salesman! Shut your mouth!" Ribbentrop, desperate to cling to his acquired status, retorted, "I am still the foreign minister, and my name is von Ribbentrop." His final profound humiliation came in April 1945. Ribbentrop attended Hitler's 56th birthday party, but when he requested a final personal audience a few days later, he was coldly rejected. Hitler, preparing his final political testament, quietly dropped his foreign minister entirely, naming Arthur Seyss-Inquart as his successor. This omission, this final rejection by the man he idolized, was the only thing that truly shook Ribbentrop's absolute faith. He fled Berlin and went into hiding in Hamburg, using the false name Herr Reiser. In June 1945, he was captured by British forces. He was found with a rambling letter addressed to Winston Churchill and Anthony Eden, criticizing British foreign policy and blaming their refusal to ally with Germany for the Soviet advance into Europe. At Nuremberg, Ribbentrop was one of the 24 defendants brought before the International Military Tribunal. He was charged with all 4 counts: conspiracy to wage aggressive war, crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. The case against him was conclusive, based on hundreds of documents bearing his signature. During the long months of the trial, Ribbentrop was described as a physically and mentally broken man, confused, nervous, and highly neurotic. His first attorney resigned, driven mad by Ribbentrop's double talk and confusing self-contradictions. His defense hinged entirely on his persona as a loyal subordinate. He claimed Hitler made all important decisions, and he had merely carried out orders, having been deceived by the Führer's claims of peace. He even attempted to justify Germany's actions by pointing to the historical context of the Treaty of Versailles. Yet, evidence showed Ribbentrop's advocacy for war had been relentless. The tribunal rejected his argument, stating that his close involvement meant he could not have remained unaware of the aggressive nature of Hitler's actions. Despite the overwhelming evidence of Hitler's guilt, Ribbentrop's devotion remained fierce. When shown a film of Hitler, Ribbentrop wept, completely overwhelmed. He seized the American prison psychologist Dr. Gilbert, asking, "Can't you feel the terrific strength of his personality?" "I don't know if you can, but we can feel it. It is enormously, deeply moving." He absolutely refused to renounce Hitler, whom he viewed as the symbol of Germany. He confessed to Dr. Gilbert, "Do you know, even with all I know, if Hitler should come to me in this cell now and say, 'Do this,' I would still do it. Isn't it amazing?" When asked if killing Hitler would have been like killing his father, Ribbentrop replied, "Yes, something like that." He preferred to be judged by history rather than to acknowledge his Führer's crimes. On October 1, 1946, the International Military Tribunal found Joachim von Ribbentrop guilty on all 4 counts and sentenced him to death by hanging. When he heard the sentence, he appeared shocked, whispering, "Death! Now I won't be able to write my beautiful memoirs." He recovered his composure in his final hours. On the morning of October 16, 1946, Joachim von Ribbentrop was the first of the condemned men to be called. He walked steadily toward the gallows, shouting his name when asked, "Joachim von Ribbentrop." Standing on the platform, facing his death, he offered his final words, "God protect Germany. God have mercy on my soul. My last wish is that German unity be maintained, that understanding between East and West be realized, and that there be peace for the world." The black hood was placed over his head, the rope adjusted, and the trap was sprung. Due to a botched execution, he struggled for several minutes before finally dying. At 19 minutes past 1 o'clock in the morning, the shadow of the Reich Foreign Minister, the social climber who traded in influence and deceit, was gone. His body was cremated, and the ashes scattered, erasing his physical presence from the land he had helped destroy. Joachim von Ribbentrop was one of history's clearest examples of moral collapse when power goes unchecked. His life was a protesting triviality, swallowed whole by the events he sought to orchestrate. He entered history not as a statesman, but as a man who turned diplomacy, the language of peace, into a mask for aggression and deceit.